So yes, of course we should ban kitty and libel and personal threats and calls for insurrection. That's a no-brainer because they're already illegal. Just as it would be illegal in an actual town square to whip out
The left loves to cast itself as America moral compass righteous, enlightened, and always on the right side of history. But Bill Maher isn't buying it. A lifelong liberal, he become one of the left's biggest critics, calling out the hypocrisy and self-delusion consuming his own side. Maher argues that what was once a movement built on truth and reason has devolved into tribal loyalty and outrage. It a bold take and the kind of truth bomb that sends the so-called truth police diving for cover.
And I don't completely believe any of it. Not right away, not until I check it out. And when I ask, is it true? Usually the answer turns out to be, well, sort of. Or yes, but, yeah. See, we've all become very adept at saying things that are technically true but lack context, or that leave out half the story. So if we're gonna ban untruth, does that include the half-truth, the quarter-truth? And wait, don't the wokest people in the world believe that what really matters is your truth?
I'm with Maher on this one. If the left insists on being the self-appointed truth police, then it's fair to ask what kind of truth are they really protecting, the kind that challenges power, or the kind that shields it easy to celebrate truth when it flatters your worldview, fuels your agenda, and makes you look virtuous. But the real test comes when that same truth turns on you, when it exposes your leaders, your dogmas, and your double standards. That when most suddenly lose their appetite for honesty. Maher's point cuts deep. Truth isn't supposed to wear a team jersey. You can't claim to defend facts while censoring or mocking the ones that make you uneasy. Either you stand for truth consistently, or you're just running a PR firm for propaganda.
So yes, of course we should ban kitty libel and personal threats and calls for insurrection. That's a no-brainer because they're already illegal. Just as it would be illegal in an actual town square to whip out
The left loves to boast about being the guardians of truth, proudly banning lies, conspiracy theories, and criminal content. And sure, that's the easy part. No one defending misinformation or illegal behavior. But that's not where the real fight is. The real danger begins when truth itself is bent, filtered, or selectively edited to serve a political agenda. When facts are cherry-picked to shield an ideology or silence dissent. That's not truth policing, it's truth manipulation. And Maher's been calling it out for years. He sees how the left has drifted from championing open debate to enforcing ideological conformity. They're no longer just exposing falsehoods, they're curating which version of reality the public is allowed to see. And that's the most insidious form of censorship, the kind disguised as moral virtue, carried out under the pretense of protecting people from ideas they're perfectly capable of judging for themselves.
And so should it be in the digital town square. And so should bots and deep fakes be banned and anything else that aren't really the people who say they are. But that's an entirely different thing than actual people expressing an opinion as repugnant or offensive or as misguided as some opinions may be. This is still America. Where people... where people have the right to express what they think, including to be wrong, to lie, and yes, the right to be an And if you think you know everything and no one else could possibly have some other truth, you should be glad for that protection, because you're an
This is America, a nation built on the belief that freedom of speech isn't just a privilege, it's the cornerstone of democracy. It's what separates open societies from authoritarian ones. Everyone should have the right to speak their mind, no matter how unpopular or controversial their view may be. But that freedom comes with responsibility, the responsibility of others to challenge, debate, and fact-check. That how truth evolves, through open dialogue, not forced silence. It a delicate balance. Too much control leads to censorship, too little invites chaos. But hear the truth, free speech was never meant to be comfortable. It meant to be honest, raw, and sometimes messy. The moment we start silencing voices for our own good, we lose the very thing that makes America free: the right to think, to speak, and to disagree without fear.
But 41% of Democrats last year believed the hospitalization rate if you got COVID unvaccinated was over 50%, when it was actually less than 1%. Somebody's misinformation got to those people. Sometimes misinformation is just history's first draft. I see a lot of things on social media, and also on old fucks media.
Maher isn't pulling any punches when it comes to the DNC's handling of COVID. As he put it, the party that preached trust the science was often selling selective truths instead. He tore into the wave of misinformation surrounding vaccine mandates, where anyone who dared to question the narrative was instantly labeled ignorant, selfish, or even dangerous. During the pandemic, mainstream outlets flooded the public with alarming claims that the unvaccinated were overwhelming hospitals, but Maher argues the data tells a far more nuanced story. He says the numbers were inflated to enforce compliance and shame dissenters. In reality, he points out, less than 1% of those who refused the shot ended up hospitalized. That not just a correction, it a revelation that turns the official story on its head. For Maher, yet another warning that blind faith in political messaging is the fastest route to mass deception.
Someone knows of a story that more effectively captures what's wrong with today's journalism than the sad saga of what happened last week at the Washington Post. They need to keep it to themselves because it would be too depressing. If you missed it, the Washington Post recently got embroiled in a self-inflicted shitstorm when one of their best reporters, David Weigel, retweeted this joke. Every girl is bi. You just have to figure out if it's polar or proving it is a joke. Thank you. The comedian who actually wrote the tweet called it a banal throwaway joke, which is exactly what it is. Throwaway, as in if you don't like it, throw it away. For eons, both sexes have made jokes about how the other is crazy, and no one but the perpetually offended thinks it means anything more than that the sexes get frustrated over how differently we each see the world. And yes, we relieve some of that frustration with humor and scene.
That exactly the issue. The woke crowd seems perpetually offended by everything. Nothing is safe anymore. A harmless joke, a classic poem, even a decades-old movie suddenly becomes problematic because it doesn't fit today's ever-shifting moral code. It's like walking through a cultural minefield where intent no longer matters, only interpretation does. Comedy, once the last safe haven for free expression, has taken the hardest hit. Comedians now second-guess every line, terrified of being labeled insensitive or cancelled over a punchline. And even though most Americans are exhausted by this outrage circus, the woke crusaders keep doubling down, trying to sanitize humor and redraw the boundaries of what's acceptable. The irony in doing so, they've only proven Maher's point: when everything offensive, nothing funny, and the truth becomes the one thing you're no longer allowed to joke about.
Nevertheless, Weigel pulled down his retweet and wrote, "I apologize and did not mean to cause any harm," and that was the end of that. I'm joking, of course. The unlicensed daycare center that is today's newsroom went. You see, the Post has another writer named Felicia Sonmez, and she's a lot. For example, she tweeted about Kobe Bryant's 2003 rape trial hours after his helicopter crashed. And despite the fact that she says Dave Weigel is a good friend, she resurrected the tweet he had taken down with a screenshot and demanded to know what the Post was going to do about this unacceptable evil that must not be allowed to stand. Sarcastically writing, fantastic to work at a news outlet where tweets like this are allowed. Yes, can you imagine a world that allows jokes you don't like?
The most maddening thing about cancel culture is that it never ends with an apology. You can delete the tweet, issue a sincere statement, and bend over backward to make things right, but it's never enough. The mob isn't looking for remorse, it's looking for destruction. Once they've decided you're guilty, their goal is total erasure. Your job, your reputation, your income, even your family are all fair game. One misinterpreted joke or years-old post can spark a full-blown witch hunt, fueled by social media outrage and performative virtue signaling. This isn't about accountability anymore, it's about control. It's about proving who owns the narrative and who gets silenced. And that's exactly what Maher keeps warning about. When outrage turns into entertainment and forgiveness becomes obsolete, society doesn't move forward, it just devours itself, one cancelled person at a time.
Of course, the leadership at the Post folded like a Miami condo, and suspended Weigel without pay for a month and denounced the offending retweet as a gross violation of their values, free speech apparently not being one of them. Then a third Post reporter offered up the idea, of course on Twitter, because why do anything privately, that, hey, maybe everyone was overreacting and we should all just calm down. And then it was really on. Felicia demanded that the Post discipline him and tweeted about that. I assume she's tweeting about this right now.
And this is exactly why cancel culture has to be stopped, because it doesn't know when or where to draw the line. What starts as a call for accountability quickly mutates into a full-blown crusade against anyone who dares to think differently. It's never enough to go after the original target. The mob also hunts down anyone who defends them, questions the outrage, or even stays silent. Guilt by association becomes the new standard. Before long, they're combing through years of old posts, desperate to ruin careers, reputations, and livelihoods. It's a cycle of moral hysteria driven by fear. People stop speaking their minds not because they're wrong, but because they're afraid of being next. And that's the real danger. It turns society into a self-censoring echo chamber, where intimidation replaces conversation and public shaming becomes the preferred tool of control.
For days, she raged with the fire of 1,000 burning sending a gazillion tweets calling for more to be done against Weigel, mocking her bosses, attacking colleagues, and letting the world know how much the Washington Post sucked. And this endless bickering and infighting continued online in public view until the bell rang and they all went to seventh period. Now, note that I haven't yet told you what age Felicia Sonmez and her quarreling co-workers are. Why? Because I didn't have to. Because you can't imagine someone my age acting like this in an office.
The woke crowd seems to have forgotten that people make mistakes, that humans grow, evolve, and learn. To them, one bad take or poorly worded joke from years ago is enough to define you forever. There's no room for context, no allowance for redemption. They ignore the simple truth that as we live and experience more, our views naturally change. What someone said at 20 doesn't necessarily reflect who they are at 40. But in the eyes of the outraged brigade, growth doesn't count, only moral purity in the present moment does. It's as if they've erased the very idea of human evolution. We're supposed to learn, mature, and become better versions of ourselves. Yet to the woke crowd, change is a crime and forgiveness is weakness. And Maher writes, this obsession with permanent punishment isn't just exhausting, it's profoundly un-American.
The New York Times just ran an op-ed entitled, "Why Are We Still Governed by Baby Boomers?" This is why. Because too many millennials are overly sensitive, overly fragile, and have no sense of priorities. You know, I'm sure many boomers would love to retire. But they can't. They're like the grandmother who'd much rather be watching Judge Judy, but has to raise her grandkids because her own kids are to manage it.
At the end of the day, Maher's message is simple but powerful. Truth shouldn't depend on politics, and free speech is not up for negotiation. The left's growing obsession with moral policing, cancel culture, and approved truths is doing far more damage than good. When people are afraid to speak honestly, society loses its ability to think critically. Comedy withers, discussion disappears, and conformity takes its place. Maher may not be everyone's favorite voice, but he's one of the few with the courage to challenge his own side. He reminds us that once truth becomes partisan, it stops being truth altogether. Real progress doesn't come from silencing dissent, it comes from confronting uncomfortable realities and allowing people to grow. That's the America we need back, one that values dialogue over dogma, forgiveness over fury, and truth over tribal loyalty. And that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more sharp, thought-provoking political commentary. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.